Hey everybody, this is Jim Lavin, and I'm going to walk you through how to use the epoxy volume calculator that I created back in beginning of February. And this is based off of the spreadsheet that Rob Sandstern created. He's with Generations Custom Creations. You've probably looked at his YouTube videos on multicolor epoxy inlays. And so as I was watching his videos, I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this as a gadget. And so I got in touch with Rob and pulled his spreadsheet down, and we built out the epoxy volume calculator. So what this does is it goes through and it will allow you to calculate a layer, and much more accurately than estimating the coverage of the layer. So it's much more accurate. It's good for Vectric Pro and Aspire. You can install it. And if you're looking for it, if you go out to Gadgets, User Submissions, and search for Epoxy Volume Calculator, you'll find it. The most recent version will always be at the bottom. I basically, as I make changes and add more functionality, I just keep adding and adding to the post. So the latest version we have is version 1.4. And we'll go through that. So I'll walk you through how to download it and install it. So we're going to go over here and we're going to click on Epoxy Volume Calculator. And I'm going to save the link to my desktop so we can find it easily. Then we're going to go over here to our desktop. Okay, once we got it downloaded, we're going to rename it. So we're going to go over here and right click on it, pick rename, and if you don't see .zip on the end, you need to make sure that Windows, you've turned on show common extensions. Otherwise what will happen is when you go to rename it, you rename it to vGadget, it will actually still have zip on it and it won't show up. So we'll go ahead and we'll hit enter to rename that. Once it's renamed, we should see it should change the icon to be in like some gears, which is what normal gadgets look like when they're pulled down. Then if we go over here into Aspire, we bring it up and we click on gadgets and we say we want to install a new gadget. And then I'm going to go to my desktop and we should find it right here. So we click on that and we click open. And then it'll tell you that it's successfully installed the gadget. And you can also double check. If you do not see it here, then what you want to do is you want to close out Aspire and then restart it. All right, now that we've got it installed, let's go ahead and let's bring up I've got a cutting board example here that I'm going to do as a epoxy inlay. I have a black layer and a white layer. If I turn off the white layer, you'll see this is what I'm going to pour black. And what we would normally have to do before the gadget is we'd have to come over here and we would have to, under Measure Inspect, we would have to basically select Span Contour Properties and then click on each one of these and then look for the vector area to get the area. So we've got like 22.36 inches here for the head. Then the banner background is 19.43. So we're at about 20 or 43 area, and then each one of the letters, we would have to do each one of the letters and bring those through. Well, that, keeping track of all that and doing it can be kind of burdensome and is error prone. So what the gadget does is when you bring it up, it'll default and it'll bring you a drop down list of all the layers you have in your project. So we'll select the one that we're getting ready to pour, which is black. And it defaults to a depth of cut of 1.25. If you want to change that, let's say you're only going to do 1.2, You can change it to 1.2. And then it also has a default ratio of hardener to resin. So what this is how much resin or hardener do you have to add to the resin by weight in order to calculate your weight for your resin. This is based off of I think this is based off of my super clear, which is 83 parts resin to 1 part, or 83 parts hardener to 100 parts resin, so it's 0.83. You can change that, and whenever you're done and you modify it, so like if you've got a 2-to-1, 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener, you can go in here and set it to its value, which would be like 0.5, and then you can hit save settings, and what that'll do is every time you open this up, it will actually read those from the registry and keep track of your saved settings for you. That way you don't have to go in and remember to change it each time if you're using a particular resin. Now, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll do single layer calculations, because this will also create a pour sheet for you. But we'll do a single layer calculation, which is just the black layer. So we select the layer we want to calculate and we click calculate. And then it'll display you the total area and then the volume. And that is basically the area multiplied by the depth of cut. So we're looking at a total volume of 5.66 or 5.67 cubic inches, which then most resins, it's a 0.554 or 0.544 conversion ratio to go from volume to fluid ounces. And so our calculation is 3.141 ounces of fluid total. So that's the total resin that we need. And then based upon the ratio of hardener to resin, it's broken that down into, we need 1.71 ounces of resin and 1.42 or 1.43 ounces of hardener for that layer. Now let me go back over here. I'm going to close it out and we'll look at the white layer. And so this is everything I'm going to pour white. So now if I bring up the gadget and we go ahead and select white. And you don't have to have your layers turned to off or on. I'm just doing that for example purposes here. But if I go in here and calculate this, it shows that we're doing a total cubic volume of 2.9 or almost 3 cubic inches, which means that we're going to need about 4.62 ounces of resin, or 1.62 ounces of resin. And of that, we're going to need 0.89 ounces of resin and 0.73 ounces of hardener to create our fluid total of 1.62. Now, if you're doing a project and you don't want to have to come back and do this every time, then you can also do a create epoxy pour sheet. And what this will do is it'll ask you to pick a place where you want it, and we'll just store it here. And we'll say yes, and then it will actually write it to that directory. Okay, so when we bring it up, this is actually shows you each layer. So the epoxy pour sheet calculates each layer, and you can ignore the ones like layer 1 is my juice groove, so we don't really care about that. The original is the original logo, which is basically everything. And then we have the black and the white. So we would actually be more interested in the black and the white here. Now let me show you one other thing, is that this is actually designed to handle what I call I'll go ahead and just create a you can have contours within contours. So let's say that I'm doing a target and I want to do a couple circles here like this. So normally when we would do this, we'd be, this one and this one would actually be used for a fill area because we're doing a V-carve. And then these two would be used for a fill area. Well, if you were to just take all these and add them up, you end up with a very large area because it's going to always be the outside of this, which is 66 area of 66 inches. But really that's not true because you need to subtract the area of this circle, which is 43, and then back add in the area of this inner circle, and then subtract out this one. So you'd get two black lines, right? So what this guy does is it actually looks at these being embedded in each other, and it will see that this one is inside this one, and so it will actually subtract that area from this one's area. Then it'll come down and it'll see that this one is actually inside this contour and also inside this contour, so it knows it needs to add the area inside of this one. And then it'll see that this one is actually inside this contour and inside this contour and this one, and so it knows that it needs to subtract this area out so that we're only left with the areas that we want to actually fill with epoxy. So that's kind of how it actually figures that out. So if you were to go over here and look at each of these, and you took this one and you got 66 inches, and then you subtract out the 43, so that leaves you 23, and then we add in another 25, so now we're at 58, and subtract another 9, so now we're at 48, 49 for your total area. When we actually go and use the epoxy volume calculator, we calculate it, you see we're getting like 38. So my math isn't quite right, but if you were to go in and add all those up, our area volume is 38 inches. So that actually handles all the embedded circles for you. Hopefully you found this useful, and if you have any questions, please drop them in the Vectric forum group. We'll catch you later.